He had 47 rooms in his mansion. Security cameras on every wall. A private chef, a personal driver, and enough money to buy silence from an entire city. But every single night, at exactly 2:47 in the morning, he would sit straight up in his bed, soaked in sweat, heart hammering against his ribs, because she was singing again. Not a recording. Not the wind. Her voice. Clear, soft, unmistakable, drifting through the hallways of a house she had never set foot in while she was alive. And the most terrifying part. The song she was singing was one she had written for him the night before she died. A song no one else in this world had ever heard. What would you do if someone you loved and lost refused to leave? What would you do if the wealth you had built on the back of a broken promise became the very prison that trapped you? This is the story of Nathan Cole, a man who had everything the world told him to want, and lost the only thing that ever truly mattered. And what happened to him in that house will make you question everything you think you know about guilt, love, and what the dead carry with them when they go. Before we go any further, we want to hear from you. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's talk about Nathan Cole. How does a man who grew up with nothing end up worth over $2 billion? How does the same man end up sitting alone in a $300 million estate, whispering to the dark, begging a ghost to stop singing? And what was the terrible secret buried underneath every dollar he ever made? These are the questions that will unravel over the next hour. And we are asking you right now, stay with us. Because what you are about to hear is not a fairy tale. It is not fiction. It is the kind of story that lives inside real human choices, real love, and real consequences that do not die when the body does. Nathan Cole was born in a small, 3-bedroom house in Clarksville, Tennessee. The kind of house where the heating went out every winter and the family pretended it wasn't as cold as it was. His mother, Margaret Cole, worked double shifts at a laundromat 6 days a week. His father left when Nathan was 9, not dramatically, not with a fight or a door slamming. He just didn't come back from work one Thursday. And that was that. Nathan grew up understanding one thing about the world with absolute clarity: money was the difference between dignity and survival. He made a quiet promise to himself, sitting on that cracked front porch at the age of 12, watching his mother come home with hands red and raw from the chemicals. He promised himself that one day, she would never have to work another day in her life. Nathan was not the most popular boy at Clarksville High. He was quiet, a little awkward, always had his nose in a book or a notebook where he scribbled business ideas that his classmates made fun of. But in 10th grade, something happened that no business plan could have predicted. A girl named Ellie Marsh walked into his English class 17 minutes late on a Tuesday morning in October, carrying a guitar case and smelling like rain and lavender. The teacher asked her to introduce herself, and she said, "I'm Ellie. I sing. I'm late because I believe arriving right on time is for people with no sense of drama." The whole class laughed. Nathan didn't laugh. He just stared at her, and something shifted inside him that had never shifted before. Ellie Marsh was the kind of person who made a room feel warmer the moment she walked in. She was funny without trying to be. She cried at commercials about lost dogs. She kept a small journal where she wrote song lyrics at 2 in the morning and then forgot about them by breakfast. She volunteered every Saturday at a food pantry on the east side of town, not because anyone told her to, but because. As she told Nathan once, people shouldn't have to be hungry just because their situation is hard right now. She had a voice that sounded like something between Norah Jones and the kind of church soprano that makes old women in the front row close their eyes and press their hands to their chests. Nathan and Ellie became inseparable by the time spring arrived. They studied together. They walked home together through the neighborhood every evening, Ellie humming whatever she was working on, Nathan listening and occasionally saying, "That part, right there, that part is the best thing I've ever heard." She would punch him lightly on the shoulder and say, Don't be cheesy, Nathan. But she was always smiling when she said it. By senior year, everyone in school knew they were together. And everyone, even the people who barely knew them, understood that what those two had was different. It wasn't teenage drama or convenient comfort. It was the real thing. Ellie had a dream. She wanted to record music. Not for fame, she was careful to say that, always, but because she believed music was the closest thing to speaking directly into someone's soul. A song can say what words can't, she told Nathan once, sitting on the hood of a borrowed car under a Tennessee night sky. You can write a whole book and still not say what 3 minutes of the right melody can do in a heartbeat. Nathan held her hand and told her she would do it. He believed that completely. He also believed that he would be the one to help her get there. That was the plan. That was their plan. They graduated. Nathan got a partial scholarship to a business program in Nashville. Ellie had no money for college, but she didn't care. She had a notebook full of songs, a guitar her grandmother had left her, and an unshakable belief that the path would open. They moved together into a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Nashville. The carpet was stained. The radiator made a sound like someone kicking a tin can. And they were completely, genuinely happy. Nathan was 23 when he met a man named Gerard Holt. Gerard was the kind of man who wore money like a second skin, cufflinks, pressed suits, the smell of expensive cologne that announced him before he entered a room. He was a real estate developer who had come to a networking event at Nathan's university, looking for young, hungry talent. Nathan introduced himself. Gerard shook his hand and said, "You've got the eyes of someone who's been poor long enough to be dangerous." I like that. Nathan didn't know whether to be offended or flattered. He chose flattered. Gerard offered Nathan an unpaid internship that quickly became a paid position. Within 2 years, Nathan had proven himself indispensable. He had a mind for numbers, for risk, for the kind of cold calculation that real estate development requires. He started making real money for the first time in his life, not life-changing money, not yet, but enough to feel the difference between the boy on the cracked porch in Clarksville and the man he was becoming. And that feeling, that intoxicating, terrifying feeling of forward motion, became like a current he couldn't stop swimming in. Ellie noticed the change before Nathan did. He was working longer hours. Coming home later. The guitar he had bought her for her 21st birthday sat in the corner of the living room collecting dust because he was too exhausted to ask her to play it, and she was too proud to play it to an empty room. They still loved each other, fiercely, quietly, but something was shifting. The current was pulling Nathan in a direction that Ellie was not being carried toward. And Ellie, who had always been honest even when it was uncomfortable, sat him down one Sunday morning and said, "Nathan, are we still doing this together? Because I feel like you're running towards something and I'm standing still, and I need to know if you're going to look back." Nathan told her he would always look back. He told her she was the reason he was running in the first place. He told her to give him 2 more years. Just 2 more years, and he would have enough to fund her music, to get her into a real studio, to make sure she never had to work 3 jobs to keep the lights on while she tried to chase her dream. Ellie looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, 2 years. But Nathan, don't lose yourself in that place. Promise me. He promised. And he meant it. He just didn't know what keeping that promise would actually cost him. If this story already has you feeling something, go ahead and drop a comment right now. Tell us, do you think Nathan made the right choice to chase the money? What would you have done in his place? We read every single comment. Now let's keep going, because this is where everything starts to break apart. 1 year into Nathan's 2-year promise, Gerard Holt brought him a deal. A massive land acquisition deal in East Nashville, a neighborhood that was still considered rough at the time, full of working-class families, small churches, community gardens, and people who had lived on those streets for 3 and 4 generations. Gerard wanted to buy it, develop it into luxury condominiums, and flip it for an enormous profit. He needed Nathan to run the numbers, manage the contracts, and coordinate the community assessments that would make the project look clean on paper. Nathan ran the numbers. And the numbers were extraordinary. His cut alone would be enough to clear every debt he and Ellie had, fund her music career 3 times over, and put money away for his mother to retire. He stared at the spreadsheet for a long time. Then he thought about the cracked porch. About his mother's red hands. About the radiator that clanged. And he signed. What Nathan told himself was that this was just business. What Nathan refused to look at too closely was that the families on those streets were people exactly like the ones he had grown up with. People who had nothing to fall back on. People whose dignity was wrapped up in owning the little they had. He did not think about that. He chose not to. The project moved fast. Within 18 months, those families were gone. The churches were sold. The community gardens were paved over. And in their place rose glass and steel condominiums with rooftop pools and concierge services. Nathan's cut was $4.3 million. The morning the wire transfer hit his account, he sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. He was not celebrating. He was not sure what he was doing. He drove home. Ellie was in the living room with her guitar, working on something new, a slow, achy melody that she had been circling for weeks. She looked up when he walked in, and without knowing why, Nathan started to cry. Not loudly. Just quietly, leaning against the door frame, crying in a way he hadn't since he was 9 years old and his father didn't come home. Ellie put the guitar down immediately and crossed the room and held him. She didn't ask what was wrong right away. She just held him. And later, when he tried to explain it, without giving her the full picture, without telling her what the project had really involved, she listened, and she said, "Whatever happened, Nathan, you can make it right. That's the thing about being a good person. You always have a chance to make it right." He did not tell her the full truth that night. That was his first real mistake. Over the next 3 years, Nathan's career exploded. Gerard Holt made him a partner. They did deal after deal. Nathan's name started appearing in business publications. He bought his mother a house in the suburbs of Nashville, a beautiful house with a proper garden, and she cried and held his face in her hands and said, "My baby. My smart baby." That meant everything to him. But something was happening underneath all of it. A slow, quiet erosion. The version of himself that had sat on that cracked porch, that had listened to Ellie hum in the evening light, that had cried in the parking garage, that version was getting harder to find. Ellie saw it. She started saying things carefully, the way you say things to someone you're scared of losing. She would ask him to come home for dinner and he would miss it. She would finish a new song and send it to him and he would say he loved it without having listened. The guitar sat in the corner more and more. Ellie started spending time with a small group of musicians, a recording collective that met on Thursday evenings near Vanderbilt, and Nathan told himself he was glad she had somewhere to go, because the guilt of not being present was easier to manage when she was occupied. Then came the Thursday in March when Nathan had a work dinner with Gerard and 2 investors from out of state. He had told Ellie he would be home by 9. He wasn't home until after midnight. When he walked through the door, Ellie was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She said, quietly and clearly, "Nathan, I need us to have an honest conversation about what we're doing. Because I don't think you see me anymore. And I need to know if I'm staying for a reason or just staying." Nathan opened his mouth to give her the speech he had been rehearsing in his car, the apology, the promise, the 2 more years, just 2 more years. But Ellie shook her head slowly. She said, "Don't. Not tonight. Tonight I just need you to sit down and look at me." He sat down. He looked at her. And for the first time in months, he actually saw her. Really saw her. The shadows under her eyes. The slight hollowness of her cheeks. The way she was holding her hands together on the table like she was holding herself together. "Ellie," he said. And then he couldn't speak. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. "I still love you," she said. "But you need to decide who you are. Because the man I fell in love with, he was someone. He was going somewhere that mattered. This person I come home to now, I don't always recognize him." Nathan sat with that all night. And the next morning, he made a decision. He was going to change. He was going to cut back. He was going to come home. He was going to get back. He was 3 weeks too late. It was a Wednesday evening in April. Ellie had been feeling tired for weeks, not dramatically, not in a way that alarmed either of them at first. She had been pushing through a demanding stretch, working part-time at a cafe in addition to her music evenings, because Nathan's schedule had made her feel quietly, carefully self-reliant. She'd had a mild headache for 2 days that she took Tylenol for and didn't mention because she didn't want to seem fragile. That Wednesday she was driving home from the Thursday Music Collective. They had moved their meeting, when a truck ran a red light on Nolansville Pike and hit her car on the driver's side. Nathan was in a meeting when his phone rang. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again. He excused himself, looked at the screen, saw an unknown Nashville number, and answered. It was a nurse at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. She used words that Nathan would spend the rest of his life trying to unhear. He drove to the hospital doing things he couldn't remember doing. He was told that Ellie had sustained severe internal injuries. They had operated immediately. He sat in a plastic chair in a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fluorescent lights for 4 hours and 21 minutes. A doctor came out. Nathan looked at the doctor's face. He didn't need the doctor to speak. He already knew. Ellie Marsh was 27 years old. She died on a Wednesday in April at 11:16 in the evening. She was alone in the operating room when it happened, because Nathan had been in a meeting and hadn't answered the first call. He carried that like a stone inside his chest for the rest of his life. At her small memorial service, Ellie had no siblings. Her parents had both passed years before, and her circle was warm but small. One of the musicians from her Thursday collective came to Nathan afterward. Her name was Dana, a quiet woman with kind eyes. She pressed a folded piece of paper into Nathan's hand and said, "She finished this the night before. She asked me to make sure you heard it someday." Nathan unfolded it. It was song lyrics. In Ellie's handwriting. The title at the top read, "For Nathan, when he finds his way back." He read the first verse standing in the parking lot of the church. He could not read past it. He folded it back up and put it in his jacket pocket and pressed his hand flat against his chest, over the pocket, over the lyrics, over the stone. He did not play the song for 2 years. He told himself he couldn't. The truth was he was afraid of what hearing it would do to him. 5 years passed. Nathan Cole's net worth crossed $2 billion. He left Gerald Holt's company and built his own. He gave large sums to charity, not quietly, but publicly, in ways that he told himself were genuine but that felt, in his honest moments, like bargaining. He bought a 14-acre estate outside of Nashville, a property that had belonged to a music producer in the 90s, all iron gates, stone walls, and old southern oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. 47 rooms. He moved in alone. No wife. No girlfriend. He had dated 2 women briefly in the years after Ellie, both intelligent, both kind, but both had told him, in different ways, that loving him felt like trying to reach someone who was standing on the other side of thick glass. He understood. He stopped trying. The first time it happened was 14 months after he moved into the estate. He woke at exactly 2:47 in the morning to the sound of singing. Low, clear, unmistakable, The melody from Ellie's last song. The one Dana had given him at the memorial. The one he had never played for anyone. The one that lived on that folded piece of paper that he kept in the drawer of his nightstand, next to his reading glasses and a photograph of his mother. He sat straight up. His chest was pounding. The sound seemed to be coming from the hallway just outside his bedroom. He got up. He opened the door. The hallway was empty and dark. The singing stopped the moment his hand touched the door handle. He told himself it was a dream. He told himself the mind does strange things with grief. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon in the kitchen and stood at the window looking out at the oak trees in the dark, and he told himself it was nothing. He went back to bed. He did not sleep again until morning. The second time was 11 days later. Same time. 2:47. Same melody. This time it was louder. This time it seemed to be coming from the east wing. The wing he almost never used, where the previous owner had built a small music room with the upright piano and acoustic wall panels. Nathan walked the entire length of the east wing corridor with a flashlight. Nothing. No one. The piano bench was undisturbed. The dust on the piano keys was unbroken. He stood in that room for a long time, holding the flashlight, listening to the absolute silence that followed. Then he whispered, very quietly, "Ellie." Just her name. Nothing answered. But the air in that room felt different from the rest of the house. Warmer, somehow. And faintly, so faintly he could not be certain it wasn't his own mind playing its cruelest trick. It smelled like rain and lavender. He hired a security firm. He had the entire estate swept for intruders, listening devices, any technical explanation at all. Nothing was found. He replaced every lock. He added motion sensors in every corridor. The following Friday night, the motion sensors triggered at 2:47 in the morning, in the east wing, and the security camera footage showed nothing. An empty corridor. A closed door. A steel piano bench. But the motion sensor had triggered. Something had moved through that hallway. Nathan sat down with the security team leader, a veteran named Frank, and showed him the footage and the sensor log. Frank studied it carefully and then looked at Nathan and said, quietly, "Mr. Cole, I've been doing this work for 22 years. And I'm going to tell you something I don't usually say to clients. Whatever this is, it is not a technical problem." Nathan thanked him. Frank drove away. Nathan stood at the iron gate of his estate for a long time, watching the taillights disappear, and then he went inside, sat down at the kitchen table, opened the nightstand drawer in his memory, because he had brought the folded paper downstairs by this point, and unfolded Ellie's song for the first time since the parking lot of the church. He sat there until 4 in the morning, reading it over and over. And he finally, for the first time, allowed himself to read past the first verse. The second verse said, "And if you find me in the places where the quiet lives, don't run away. I'm only here to say the things I meant to say. I'm only here because I still believe in you, even now, even after, even in the in-between." Nathan Cole put his face in his hands and wept. Not politely. Not quietly. The kind of weeping that comes from somewhere so deep in a person that it has no relationship to dignity or composure. He cried for Ellie. He cried for the Thursday night he was in a meeting. He cried for the families on those East Nashville streets. He cried for the version of himself that had made a promise on a cracked porch and then slowly, gradually, carefully, in ways he had explained to himself as necessary and reasonable, broken almost every part of it. He cried until he was empty. And then he sat in the silence of his 47-room mansion and listened. Really listened. And the house was quiet. "Now we want to stop and ask you something, because we think this is important. Have you ever been so focused on building something, a career, a life, a future, that you looked up one day and realized the person you were building it for was no longer there? Or worse, that you had slowly become someone they wouldn't recognize? Leave your answer in the comments. We want to hear from you. And if this was your life, if this was your story, would you have done anything differently? Nathan did something that surprised everyone who knew him. 6 weeks after that night at the kitchen table, he called a community meeting in East Nashville. He stood in a church fellowship hall, not unlike the ones that had been sold off during the development project he had been part of, and he introduced himself. Most people in the room already knew who he was. The tension was thick and quiet and honest. He did not give a speech. He said, "I was part of something that hurt this neighborhood. I knew it when I did it and I did it anyway, and I have been living with that. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness tonight. I'm here to ask what I can do." The room was silent for a long time. An older woman in the second row, gray-haired and straight-backed, said, "You can start by listening. And then by showing up. Week after week. Not just tonight." Nathan said, "Yes, ma'am." He meant it. Over the next 3 years, Nathan quietly funded the rebuilding of 2 community centers in East Nashville, helped relocate and compensate 14 families who had been displaced in the original development, and established a music scholarship at a local high school. He did not issue a press release. He did not make a documentary about his journey. He just showed up. Week after week. The way the woman in the second row had asked. And slowly, not dramatically, not with a single clean moment of redemption, but slowly, the way a wound closes, something in him began to change. He started leaving the estate more. He started calling his mother more. He started sleeping better. The singing stopped 11 months after the night at the kitchen table. Nathan did not notice immediately. He woke up one morning, looked at the clock, it was just past 3, and realized the night had been completely silent. He lay in the dark for a while, completely still. The house was quiet. Not an empty quiet, not the kind that had felt like absence all those years. A different kind. A settled kind. He thought about Ellie. He thought about rain and lavender. He thought about a girl who had walked into an English class 17 minutes late carrying a guitar case, and had made the whole room warmer. He said, quietly and clearly, into the dark of the room, "I hear you, Ellie. I got it. I'm sorry it took me so long." He pressed his hand to his chest. Closed his eyes. And for the first time in years, he slept without dreaming. Here is what Nathan Cole understood by the time he was 41 years old, sitting in a chair on the stone terrace of his estate as the Tennessee autumn turned the oak leaves the color of fire. The money had never been the problem. The ambition had never been the problem. The problem, the quiet, grinding problem, was that somewhere in the spring toward the life he had promised himself, he had stopped asking whether the person running beside him was still running beside him. He had stopped turning around. And by the time he turned around, she was gone. Not because she had left him. Because he had left her, slowly, incrementally, invisibly, in every small way that people leave each other while still sharing the same address. And what brought her back? What pulled her voice through the walls of a 47-room mansion that she had never set foot in? Nathan never said it was a ghost, exactly. He never said it was supernatural, exactly. What he said, to the very few people he ever told this story to, was that grief has its own physics. That love, when it is real and it is unfinished, does not simply dissolve when the body it lived in is gone. That there are things we owe each other that transcend death, not in a frightening way, but in a demanding one. Ellie had not come back to haunt him. She had come back to finish what she started. She had come back to make sure he found his way. Because that is what she had always done. From the first day he knew her. Nathan had the lyrics to her song framed. He hung it in the East Wing music room, directly above the upright piano. Below the frame, on a small brass plaque, he had engraved a single line, not from Ellie's song, but from something she had said to him one evening on the hood of that borrowed car under a Tennessee night sky. A song can say what words can't. 3 minutes of the right melody can do what a whole book can't. Nathan sat in that music room some evenings, not often, but sometimes, and played the melody on the piano with one finger, slowly, the way you play a melody you've heard in your head for years but only recently learned to let out. He was not a musician. The music was imperfect and halting and not particularly good by any technical measure. But the room, in those moments, smelled faintly of rain and lavender. And Nathan was okay with that. Here is what we want to leave with you tonight. Think about the people in your life who are still here. The ones who call. The ones who wait up. The ones who write songs with your name in the title and fold them up and keep them, just in case. Think about the meetings you are in right now that are costing you evenings at the dinner table. Think about the promises you have made and how long ago you stopped counting the days against them. You do not have to be a billionaire in a 47-room estate to lose the most important person in your life to a slow drift. It can happen in a 2-bedroom apartment. It can happen quietly. It can happen in the space between 2 unanswered phone calls. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it cannot be undone. Do not wait for the singing to start before you listen. We want to know, right now, in the comments, what part of Nathan's story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment he missed the call? Was it what Ellie's last song said? Was it the night he finally cried? Or was it something else entirely, something that reminded you of your own life, your own choices, your own person? Tell us. We are reading every single one. And here is our final question for tonight. If the person you love most in this world wrote a song about you, right now, today, what do you think it would say? And more importantly, would you be proud of the answer? If this story moved something in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the stories we tell on this channel are exactly this, real, human, and designed to stay with you long after the video ends. And if you think tonight's story was something, wait until you hear what we have coming next. Because the next story begins with a woman who received a letter from her dead husband, postmarked 3 days after the funeral. We'll see you there.